Hello, everybody. Welcome back for another episode of the App Service Community Stand-Up. I'm your host, Byron Tardif, and I'm joined, as always, by our producer, Denver. And our guest today is going to be Adrian Hall. Adrian, do you want to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit of what you do, why you're here.
Sure. Hi, I'm a architect within the same group that App Service is in, which is our developer division. And I deal primarily with helping customers to migrate to the cloud, migrate their applications to the cloud. And I cover things like what code changes are needed, what infrastructure is needed, that sort of thing.
Right. So today, the main thing is going to be patterns and practices for architectures to migrating your apps into the cloud. But before we jump into that, as always, we have a little demo of some of the fresh stuff that's coming into the portal. And today I'm going to talk about this feature, which is the new way of having unique host names. This is currently in preview. You will start seeing it in the portal, but it will eventually become the default way by which we configure the host name of your app. So the old way is you would just have your AzureWebsites.net. So if you wanted to grab something like test, you would come back with, oh, this is already used because it's not unique. This needs to be global within the whole AzureWebsites.net DNS zone. So with the new feature, it basically creates this unique identifier. There's a combination of hash and the region where you're deploying, and makes it so you can grab resources with the naming convention that you might want. So if you want to have test, you can actually have 87 tests. They're each going to be unique, and we have less problems with those types of collisions. The other thing I wanted to call out is, again, another feature that's in preview. I think I mentioned this before. When on the create flow, but it's also available post create. So we're calling it better together. We're still working on probably picking a better name for it. But the idea is providing you recommendations for other services that exist within Azure that would enhance the performance reliability of your app. These recommendations are driven by AI. So we analyze your subscription, we analyze your usage patterns, and we compare that with the model that we have of all of the different customers that we've hosted on the platform over 10 plus years. And we see the patterns that would benefit your app. So in this case, for example, my app is being recommended to use Redis. And this is because I'm talking to a database, so I can reduce my database cost by having Redis in between, improve performance and reliability of the backend database calls. So that's an example of how these recommendations would help me with my particular app and the particular architecture and code that I have deployed. So this is talking a little bit about architecture. So that's kind of like the segue. So Adrian, I guess take it away.
Take it away. So
take it away.
Yeah, I mean, my real focus is how do people migrate their applications to the cloud, and App Service is central to that because it's the easiest way of running any web application on the Azure cloud. But when we look at applications, there's basically three things you have to do when you're considering migrating something. First of all, there's a set of code changes that you're going to have to make. Imagine, for example, you've got an application that writes to an underlying disk. You're probably going to have to swap those writes out to be blob storage. You might have to change out how you access your database. You might have to change out how you do authentication. So those are the things that the code changes that you have to do. The second group is the code changes that will enhance the reliability or security of your application. Things like cache, things like using managed identities for accessing the database. You don't have to do them. Honestly, it will work without them, but it's a good idea.
Right.
The third piece, and this is probably the hardest piece to get your head around, is you already know what pieces your application needs. Your example quite before was quite a good one. I've got a website talking to a database, maybe with some storage on the side.
Right.
So that's my first layer of how do I, what resources do I pick? App Service, Azure SQL, Cosmos DB, Azure Storage. Great. There's a whole bunch of other things that you have to wrap around that for secrets management, for configuration, A/B testing, for logging and monitoring, for basic telemetry, for security. How do I isolate the network capabilities? How do I access resources that are within my secure enclave that my application, my IT organization has actually established for me. So
Right.
those need to come along for the ride, and this makes it incredibly complicated to actually construct a repeatable deployment that actually does that.
Makes sense.
We've got a bunch of things. How do I show my browser?
Here we go. And while we're doing that, just a reminder, we're live. So if you have any questions, just drop them in the chat. We'll do our best to answer them on the fly. And if we don't answer this or you're watching the recording, you can also reach us on Twitter. So there's the App Service Twitter where you can just ping us and don't send no support requests. That's not what that is for. But just general questions, we can usually answer them on the fly. And just Adrian, one of the things that I think about when we're talking about this is sometimes I have an architecture in my head. I know what are the pieces that I want to use, but I don't necessarily know what those pieces are in Azure.
Yeah, that's a perfectly valid thing. It's the Azure Copilot is a great option to figure out, because you can ask it what's the best service for running my blah application.
Right.
What's the best way of running a web app written in a .NET framework app in C#, just as a for example. So the first two pieces that I want to give you here are generalized advice. So the cloud adoption framework is this big mechanism that says how do I move my entire organization to the cloud, and it covers things like policy around cost management, around the tools that are capabilities that are done there, and there's a lot of documentation around this. So this is the entry point. We will put the link in with the show notes. But the cloud adoption framework is something that it's a lot of generalized advice on how to adopt the cloud.
Right.
The pieces that I often get to is what is called the Azure Well-Architected Framework. And this gets to more specific advice. And that specific advice is driven down into 5 basic pillars. The first one, reliability, security, cost optimization, operational excellence, and performance efficiency. Now, when we're developing code, we inevitably go on to the reliability, security, and performance pillars.
Right.
And when we're going about infrastructure, we're talking about security, cost optimization, and operational excellence majority of the time. All of them go across all of them, but that you get very, very specific advice about those. So how do we use those? Remember those 3 buckets that I said? Well, the first one was, what do I have to do to my application, to the actual code, to make it run well?
Right.
So we have a thing we call it AppCAT, which stands for Application Code Assessment Tool. You can get to it with aka.ms/AppCAT. And it's available for .NET and Java. The .NET one runs inside of Visual Studio. The Java one runs as a command line tool. And what it will output for you is it will analyze your source code. And it will tell you based on that source code, these are the bits of source code that you need to correct in order to run properly on the cloud.
Right.
So things like, hey, you need to fix that storage thing. You're using system.io, and you need to switch it to Azure storage instead.
Yeah, the other one that we usually see is like my database is using Windows integrated auth.
Yes,
that's not going to work on the cloud.
Yeah. So this will pull out those sorts of things, and it will give you a list, and you can go down the list and you can turn them into issues, and when you've done them, you can check off the issue and see what's remaining. And it does group them. So for example, if you've got lots of places where you're using file storage and you need to switch it to Azure storage, it will group all those together and allow you to fix them all at once. So once you've got a clean run of the application and code assessment, the next thing to look at is, what do I need to run? What infrastructure do I need to run?
Right. Sorry, before we move forward, I just want to remind people we have a couple demos of this. I think, Denver, you did one for the Java tool in a previous community stand-up. So we'll drop the link that in the show notes if you want to look at the specific end-to-end flow of running the tool, doing the code changes, and then moving to the next step.
Cool. I didn't realize you'd actually demoed it already.
Yeah.
Awesome.
No, this is good because it all kind of like connects together, but you're giving us the big picture.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
So the next thing is what infrastructure do I need to do? And for that, there are a number of landing zone accelerators. And just to give you an idea, this is the app service one. Again, link will be in the show notes. But this comes with not just the advice, how do we solve for the identity and access management, for the security issues, for governance, things like that. But it actually gives you Bicep and Terraform templates to actually implement the reference architecture that they have implemented.
Yeah, and this is huge, right? Because I've gone down the path of trying to create something like this on the portal, and it takes hours, right? Because you're going from one resource to the other, and then you're copying things from one to the other, and just being able to have a place where you literally run the command and it's infrastructure as code, and you end up with the reliable and repeatable chunk of resources that are going to work.
Yeah.
Make it so that you can focus on just your code, right? That way you're not fighting, is it the infrastructure that's not working? Did I configure it wrong? Or is it actually a problem in my code?
Yeah, absolutely. The good thing about this one is regularly we implement what's known as the HubSpoke architecture, where you have a hub with a whole bunch of shared resources, things like, secret storage or firewalls or Azure front doors for web access. And then your application lives in the spoke. And what we've done here is we've separated those two out into repeatable modules. Now, you are likely to already have a hub,
right,
which your IT organization runs. Not a problem. You can take that out of the Bicep because it's just a reference within the main Bicep file, and link in your existing hub. So the actual capabilities of composition here are really awesome. The other thing to note here is that the reference architectures, both the Bicep version and the Terraform version, are written with the Azure Developer CLI, AZD. And that means that you can do an AZD up and have your own copy of this architecture so that you can be developing inside of the architecture that you're actually going to deploy afresh, with all the complexities that the HubSpoke network and all of those enterprise type security requirements bring into the picture.
Right. And the other important thing to call out is that this is evolving, right? So as capabilities and features change, the architecture gets updated. So it's something that we maintain and invest in constantly.
Yeah. And there's another thing that I think that is worthwhile pointing out here. There is a set of modules, both Terraform and Bicep, called Azure Verified Modules, which you can reach from aka.ms/avm. So if you want, for example, to deploy an app service, but you want it with private networking, with custom domains, with full diagnostics for an App Insights piece or whatever else is there, the Azure Verified module for App Service kind of encapsulates the best practices, batteries included version of that. So it becomes much easier to take those AVM modules and integrate those into your Bicep or Terraform capabilities rather than doing the raw resources that that have the full API.
I mean, the way I think about this is we're giving you the guardrail so that you're not shooting yourself in the foot, right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So we're actually moving all of this stuff over to use AVM so that you can more easily modularize this.
Cool. This is really nice.
Now, the third piece. So we've covered what code changes you must make, and we've covered the infrastructure that you must implement. The third piece is, what about the things that you should do? They're not required, but you're operating in the cloud. So that means that there are things that you should do, right? At the end of the day, you can access your database using a username and password where that username and password is an admin. You shouldn't do that, but you can. So what we implemented was a pattern. We're calling it the reliable web app pattern, which you can get through aka.ms/eap/RWA. There is a Java version and there is a .NET version. And that comes with advice of the things that you should do, combined with a reference architecture, which includes code on the ways to implement that. So
and this is, you're basically guiding us to leverage the cloud. These are things that you could potentially not do on premise, but because you're in the cloud now, you're taking advantage of the infrastructure that's there and basically get more bang for the buck on your investment of migrating your app.
Yes. So this gives you the ability to move forward. And actually, I mean, a common reason more recently for adopting the cloud in the first place is to get access to AI models.
Right.
So you bring the application in, and you've probably got this like legacy application, .NET Framework 4.5 or whatever, and you're bringing that in, and you're saying, hey, I want to run this because I want to access AI. Well, how do you actually do that? The patterns that we're establishing within the Azure Architecture Center are actually going to take you through the process. The reliable web app pattern is the re-platform story of this, and this is like, how do I take the legacy app and put it on the cloud? We're going to have a modernize and add AI pattern as well. The modernized one's coming out soon. The AI one will be out in the fall, where we actually say, okay, you've got this legacy app. Now, how do I start modifying it? And the way that you modify it is you add in your own services, and then you consume those services from your legacy app. So you've got to have things like, how do I build containers and securely deliver containers in order to modernize my app? And that becomes super important when you go to the next stage of, how do I handle AI? You're now going like, well, I already know how to use containers now, so I can deliver those AI improvements relatively easily. So this is a journey.
During our Ignite or build session, we actually did this, right? Where there is a lot of people that are, hey, to use AI, do I need to rewrite my app? And the answer is no. You can grab that old app that you have, and if you follow the right patterns, you can connect AI to that old application. And I think we did it with the .NET Framework 4.8 ASP.NET app.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll add a link to that video as well. But I think what we're saying is this is also getting formalized so that you have all of this documented in the reliable web app pattern, and it's just one more thing that you can do with your app.
Yeah, and this is absolutely the reason. Is like it's great having a demo. I saw the Scott Hunter live presenting that. Absolutely, it's great having a demo. But as an attendee, I go away and I say, that's fine, but how do I actually do it with my application?
Right.
Having this guidance, and the guidance also includes the reference architecture, so the code and the infrastructure necessary to implement that.
Yeah, not just for .NET, but also for Java or for other patterns.
Yes, we're also working with our partners in the Python team to come out with the Python version of this. And I do believe that it's shaping up. The code is still being written, but the intelligent web app pattern, which is the one that adds AI to the system, it's going to be incorporating the very latest techniques and best practices, and a lot of that is, hey, you have to deal with Python.
Yep. Awesome. So far we've looked at our code, made the necessary changes so that it's running on the cloud. We've provisioned the infrastructure with a repeatable infrastructure as code, and we've started to take advantage of the power of the cloud with a reliable web app pattern. So what's next?
So that is basically it. I mean, it's like, how do you just remember those well-architected principles, which is security and reliability and performance. Performance is, okay, I want to include a cache. Why would I want to include a cache? Here's the measurements that you should make in order to determine whether a cache is going to be advantageous for you. And here's how you implement it, both in your code and in the infrastructure for it. For security, how to deal with managed identity. For reliability, how to put in retry and circuit breaker. One of the things of going to the cloud is, instead of one service, 2 services that you pretty much know when they're going to go down, you now have your adopting platform as a service, things reboot underneath you, and they're usually not a problem. You just refresh the page and carry on. But we're putting in the techniques necessary so that you can decide to move on to the to make sure that those don't affect your users. So the combination of the 3 is really powerful as you move your applications to the cloud.
And I think the important thing to call out is that all of these patterns are things that you're going to want to do whether you're migrating an existing app or you're rewriting entirely into something new, right? They're the right thing to do for an app that is being hosted on the cloud.
Correct. It's like all of a sudden that you're not in charge of the schedule of the reboots to put in a new security fix.
Right.
It's a good thing. You're not responsible for putting in the new security fix, but it's a bad thing that you no longer have the precise time that downtime is going to occur. So you have to put in capabilities to say, hey, sometimes it's not going to be there. 99.999% of the time it's going to be there. Sometimes it's not.
Yeah. Or sometimes there's tweaks that you need to do on the service to get to that 4 nines, right? Out of the box, it might not be there, but if you put the right checkboxes, it will be there.
One of the things that we discuss is when and how to go to multi-region, just as a for example.
Yep. Okay. If there's nothing else, we can wrap it up. We have the next community stand-up scheduled for, what is it? August 7th. There you go. We will be talking to Datadog. I think this one's going to start a little bit earlier because we have some people joining us from India, so it will be more like 9 a.m. Pacific time. But you can always catch up on the recording. And then, as always, you can reach out to us on Twitter and we'll have the show notes on the App Service blog. So go check it out. We'll put all the links of all the different aka.ms things that Adrian called out, and the different demos for both the older community stand-up where we did the Java cat migration thing, as well as the build session where we show the app modernization with the legacy app going into AI. With that, thanks everybody for joining. Thank you very much for coming to the show, Adrian. We love having you here, and thank you, Denver, for making sure that everything works and we look somewhat professional when we do this. Any closing thoughts, Adrian?
Well, thank you very much for having me, and it's been a pleasure presenting this to you.
Awesome.